Thank you all for having me tonight. It's a real pleasure to be able to speak to everyone. And hopefully after my talk, if you're not too depressed, you will come out and help me and looking for these magnificent birds of prey. So just about me briefly then, I am the Raptor officer with the Northern Ireland Raptor Study Group. I've been in that role since 2013, and I've been working on various raptor projects in Northern Ireland since 2008. From the red kite releases through, I did my buzzard PhD here, through to the hen harrier work, and all sorts of different projects we're involved in. So birds of prey then, well, the monitoring of raptors is more important than ever because over half of all raptors are declining globally. And different species have different pressures on them, whether it be habitat loss and degradation, leading to declines in prey availability and abundance and lack of nest site availability, whether that be persecution, disturbance, bioaccumulation, because as top predators, they build up heavy metals and rodenticides in their bodies. Can be disease, and climate change is also having an impact. And as apex predators, our birds of prey are so important to us. They're important in balancing the food web, also for our own enjoyment and grounding and well-being. We all love to see bird of prey in the wild. So what is a bird of prey? Well, the word raptor means to seize or to plunder, and all birds of prey have the same adaptations really. So they've got strong claws, hooked talons, they've got a hooked beak, and essentially they eat other animals, and that can bring them into conflict with humans at times. So they all have the same adaptations, but they do things slightly differently. So the sparrowhawk here, for example, it ambushes its prey. Then we have the peregrine falcon that will chase prey, or the kestrel and the buzzard, for example, that are happy to pounce onto prey after being at the height for some time. In Ireland and in north and south, there are 14 raptors, diurnal and nocturnal, which breed or are here regularly. So we have the accipiters, the buzzard, red kite, goshawk, sparrowhawk, hen harrier, marsh harrier, white-tailed eagle, and the golden eagle. We have the family of the falcons, the peregrine, the merlin, and the kestrel. We have the strigidae, which are the true owls, the long-eared owl and short-eared owl. And we have the titanidae, which is the barn owl. And as of last year, we possibly can push that to 15, given that we have had successful osprey nesting. Now, the sharpest of you there will have noticed that that's not a bird of prey photo in the bottom right, that's a raven's nest. But as the Raptor Study Group, we also monitor ravens because quite often our birds of prey will use raven nests. Ravens are really the key nest builders in the country, and the falcons who don't build nests themselves will happily use old ravens' nests, as will buzzards and red kites. So we keep an eye on the ravens when we're out and about. The Raptor Study Group then, well, we were a club and society and originally founded in 1991. We're just a group of voluntary raptor field workers who take a real interest in the birds of prey. And some people are semi-experts and other people are definitely experts. And every year we go out and we check for occupancy, whether there's birds occupying old nest sites. We search for and document new nest sites. Key issues that we see when we're out and about, the threats and pressures, we monitor those. Carry out surveillance at some sites where we know that the birds are being persecuted, and we try and raise awareness of, what is a bird of prey and how can people help. Since 2013, the Environment Agency then has funded my role and a role from a colleague, Mark Ruddock, who's another bird of prey.
Sorry, Eimear, I'm just going to interrupt you. The volume has dipped slightly, so if you can maybe just position yourself. I don't know whether you can try your.
Sorry, is that any better?
It's still a wee bit low, actually. I've just had a few just have said the volume has dipped. Some people can seem to hear okay. It has dipped a wee bit.
I wonder what's happened. If I turn my volume up.
Turn your volume up, yeah, to the max. That would be great.
Any better? Any better than
that's better? Just whatever way. Yeah, it's probably just the positioning because you haven't got the headphones on.
Okay. Let's move this anyway. Everybody happy?
That's far better.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. No, I've probably been moving around and that's just been the issue there. Yeah, so my role's been funded since 2013 through the Environment Agency,
And that is to coordinate the volunteers then. So if you imagine up until then, people were all doing their own thing, but they may have been visiting the same nest site several times in a week and not knowing what other people were doing. So this role really is to centralize all of that, make sure people know which sites other people are at, or where there's effort needed. And then also collate all the records and use that to statistically report on the distribution of the birds, their breeding success, population changes, etc. So the key thing about the Raptor Study Group is with this whole element of the field workers, and all that data then feeds in and is used by the experts to work out all the decision-making tools that we need basically in the country to try and protect our birds of prey. And we can provide that as advice and expertise to other NGOs, to the government, etc. And we can carry out research projects when we think there's something going on with a species. So all the raptor records go into a centralized raptor database. That is the sightings. Every year we look at breeding occupancy, so whether there's birds at the site or not. And then we look at the outcomes, so whether it was confirmed, probable, possible, or we can't confirm breeding. We monitor productivity, so how many chicks are produced, and we also monitor mortality, so causes of death. As I say, all this feeds into the central database, and then we use that information to develop tools such as sensitivity mapping, or looking at presence or absence of a species, looking at declines of species across, for example, the graph there are protected areas, and we can monitor basically what's going on. So why monitor birds of prey then? Well, this great book here by Gordon Darcy shows the history of all of Ireland's birds of prey and owls, past and present. So due to persecution and habitat loss, by the 1900s, the look of Ireland was very different to what it is today, and was very different to what it was in the 1800s. So by 1900, the breeding range of the sparrowhawk, hen harrier, peregrine merlin, and kestrel were all restricted. But these species were completely extinct. So from 12 diurnal birds of prey, we had dropped right down to 5. The common buzzard, red kite, white-tailed eagles, marsh harrier, golden eagle, goshawk, osprey, and possibly honey buzzard or hobby, but there's a bit of an argument whether they ever nested here with any regularity. They were all extinct. The ones in red then, the buzzard and goshawk, have come back on their own. The red kite, white-tailed eagle, and golden eagle have been part of reintroduction programs that need a helping hand from ourselves, humans. And the marsh harrier and osprey do breed in very small numbers year in, year out. So in the past, we lost many native species due to persecution and habitat loss, and some held on in small numbers. But as of the mid-1900s then, so in 1985, the wildlife order was introduced, and that really changed the fortune of many of our birds of prey. So Article 4 in the wildlife order protects all wild birds and their nests and eggs. All birds of prey in Northern Ireland are also on the Schedule 1, which means they're protected at all times. And the persecution of these birds can result in £5,000 fine or up to 6 months custodial sentence for every offence. Several of our species, the golden eagle, white-tailed eagle and osprey, the barn owl, the peregrine and kite, are also on Schedule A1, which means you can't destroy their nest at any time of the year. And these are species that are long-lived and that reuse their nest sites. And another key one is Article 6, which sets out that it's illegal to put into position any trap or poisonous agent that would cause any injury to a wild bird that may in contact with it. So that will feature heavily in my talk as we go on, as you can imagine. So why are birds of prey protected? Well, because persecution, that is the illegal trapping, killing, nest destruction, theft of eggs, theft of adults, still goes on. Habitat loss is still an issue, disturbance is still an issue, and the use of rat poison is still an issue. And they're very real threats to these long-lived, slow reproducing and rare species, both here and across the range. So prominent in our minds is the death of the 2 white-tailed eagles last year in Antrim, with a substance which should never have been used outdoors. It's going to be a key element of my talk that goes through that this hasn't gone away, basically, the persecution of birds of prey. But for now, anyway, I want to go on to speaking a little bit about each of the species. I'm not going to talk about the owls today. I'll just stick with the diurnal birds of prey. And just to keep in your mind that, remember that over 50% of Northern Ireland's birds of prey today are either on the red or amber lists. So the first one we'll come to is the common buzzard, common by name, common by nature. So for each of these slides, I'll show you down in the bottom left the status, whether it's red, amber, or green, across both the UK, because Northern Ireland's part of the UK, and Ireland, because Northern Ireland's birds also feature in the Ireland one. So we're in this unique position of falling into both categories. And then you'll have a population number. So our best guesstimate of buzzards is 3,000 breeding pairs in Northern Ireland. You should probably be familiar with the bird. It's a medium-sized bird of prey, a lovely brown colour. They range from cream right through to very dark, almost black. Young buzzards, as in the photo there in the top right, will happily spend their winters together in fields looking for worms and beetles. They're very opportunistic, so they'll take anything from carrying dead things on the road right through to chasing small rabbits, young pheasants, etc. They're tree nesting. They'll nest in both deciduous and conifers. And these are the sort of landscapes you can expect buzzards. You could have them on the cliffs, along the coasts. You can have them in deciduous woodlands, coniferous woodlands, and also the lowlands. The key thing that people maybe don't know about buzzards is that there was a massive population crash here in the early 1900s. So just like the other birds of prey we mentioned earlier in Gordon Darcy's book, the buzzard was one of these where the range was completely restricted, and by the 1900s, they were completely extinct from the island of Ireland. These maps were commissioned because myxomatosis had been introduced in 1953, and basically the BTO wanted to find out what impact that might have on the recovering buzzard population. So by 1954, the buzzards held on. There were 8 pairs still in County Antrim, and in 1955, they were extinct for the second time. So all those buzzards that you see nowadays, they've all come back from that second level of extinction across the island of Ireland. And they've done so because they're so opportunistic. But it's important to remember, it's very easy to get there again. It only takes a few bad years to affect any of our birds of prey. And buzzards in particular are affected by avian flu, as well as the persecution issues that they face. So it's a natural recovery. And if we look at the BTO Breeding Bird Atlas, you can see the change between the 1988 Atlas and the 2008. All that pink stuff, or sorry, all those red arrows are gain. You can see it was a massive recovery. And that's led us really into shifting baseline syndrome, where people today, 30 years and younger perhaps, are just used to seeing buzzards everywhere, and buzzards maybe get a bit of a rough deal because of that. But we need to always keep it in mind that these birds have come back to their own fruition, and we need to protect them because it's very easy to lose them again. The species very similar to the buzzard then, the red kite. Green listed across UK, but it's been red listed in Ireland. They were originally amber, and it's been downgraded, or upgraded, sorry. So there are between 25 and 30 breeding pairs in Northern Ireland. They communally roost in the winter, as you can see in this photo. And they're a species that they're not afraid of humans, basically. So if you think of a buzzard sitting on a fence post and you stop the car to take a photo, the buzzard generally will fly away. The red kite will actually usually fly closer, fly over the car, have a nosy. They've no fear. And unfortunately, that leads them into trouble, especially when it comes to being shot. They live in similar areas to the buzzards, so with deciduous on the edges of conifer woodlands, usually in the lowlands, but they have started to move into more upland areas. And we can see here the difference in the buzzard on the left and the red kite on the right. So the buzzard, very much a browner bird than the red kite. The red kite, I always describe to people, in flight, it's more like a seagull where it has these distinct wrists, these carpal joints. And the buzzard always looks like a shallow V in flight, or straight-winged. And the kite very much more angular. It uses its forked tail like a rudder and turns the tail independently to the wings. Very different to the flight of a buzzard. So the red kite, many of you will be aware that it was the subject of a reintroduction. So unlike the buzzard, it didn't come back on its own. They really, really don't like crossing large bodies of water. And they also like living with other kites. So it was going to take a long time before kites really re-established themselves into Ireland, north and south. In Northern Ireland, we were the 11th of 11 reintroduction programmes, being just superseded by the Republic of Ireland in 2007. Our reintroduction started in 2008 when there were 80 birds released from Wales in across 2008, 9 and 10. They all received wing tags. Fortunately, because we were the last scheme, our wing tag colour is brown on the left. You can see those other lovely dots are all colours of wing tags for the other schemes. Very much more visible than our brown tags, but we are where we are. Always the poor cousin, I think, in Northern Ireland. They're very opportunistic, again, like the buzzard. They'll eat anything, particularly young corvids, which they love. They'll take rats. Again, red kite's not afraid of people. They'll happily hunt around farm buildings, which again doesn't help them in terms of build-up of rodenticides. They'll happily eat dead animals in the fields and off the side of the roads, and they'll eat frogs if they can get them. Toads. We've had stoat in nest, anything really. They've got this long gut. So work by Barton and Houston, basically, back in the days when you still cut animals up to see what was going on inside. They looked at the gut lengths of all different birds of prey, and they found that the red kite has the longest gut of any of our UK birds of prey. And what that means is they can eat things that are so long dead and still get energy from them. So something that has been dead on the road for maybe 3 weeks, red kite is still able to get energy out of it. Whereas something like the peregrine has a very, very short gut and needs to eat live prey or very close to being live prey. They're limited really only by what they can carry. They're very weak feet. So the size of the bird, they're 5.5 foot wingspan, but their feet are tiny. It doesn't hurt when they pinch you with their feet. And as I say, they're only limited by what they can carry, really. They are often referred to as the cloth kite because they like to decorate their nests with white things. We have found ladies' underwear from Marks and Spencer's in a nest. We found plastic bags. The nest in the top left, that's from the Republic of Ireland. They've tennis balls. There's been gardening gloves. We have a nest in County Down where they had a sheep feed bag. It's one of the big plastic bags halfway up the tree hung. And work across Spain basically found out that the reason they do this is to signify to other kites how brilliant they are at collecting white things. So the more white they had in the nest, the stronger the bird really was at showing other territorial males and females, don't come in here and take my wife because look how much white I've got in my nest, you haven't a chance. So it's a territoriality sort of thing. Always follow up something fun with something depressing. There were 80 birds released, as I said, and at least 225 wild chicks fledged up until last year. 48 of those have currently been found dead. Of those, 13 were confirmed poisoned and 3 shot. So if you think of that, that's a third of all the birds found dead have been confirmed persecuted, and 5% of all the birds released and born here have been confirmed persecuted. They're only the ones that we find. And also, a lot of the birds that we find are too decomposed for testing. So it's really only the tip of the iceberg of what's going on. And a lot of it probably comes down to the kite eating dead things. So if someone's putting out bait in the countryside, whether it be for birds of prey or foxes or badgers or what it's for, the kite is likely to find it. Last year then, there were 20 breeding pairs. So we're not where we would have hoped 15 years after that first release. We would have hoped we'd be into the hundreds at this stage. So moving on then, another wonderful bird of prey, the hen harrier. So the hen harrier is red listed in the UK. It's currently amber listed in Ireland, but I'm sure you'll have seen the news in the last 2 weeks that the Irish population has dropped by 1/3 since the last national survey, and it's most likely going to be, it will be red listed at the next review, basically, of the listings. In Northern Ireland then, we've just finished our national hen harrier survey in 2023, and the results of that will be out now in the next month or so. And we've got between 35 and 40 territorial pairs. So territorial pairs is the term we use when it's confirmed plus probable breeders. And the probable breeders are basically people have witnessed everything apart from that last piece of information that shows that the birds definitely laid eggs. So displaying birds, bit of nest building, things like this, can't just say for certain they've laid eggs. So the hen harrier is a bird of open country. The males are beautiful grey colour and the females this gorgeous brown. The female is often referred to as well as a ringtail. You can see the bird standing on the ground there in the nest with the bars across her tail. Juvenile hen harriers look like a female. So sometimes we use that term ringtail when we can't distinguish between a juvenile and a female because the juvenile males also have that brown look about them. They have an owl-like face because like the owls, their ears are on the sides of their heads and they use their ears for hunting. So you can see the female there in the center in that picture where she's hunting close to the ground They quarter along the ground, listening for prey, and then spiral down and drop onto the prey. They won't chase anything. So if they're after a meadow pivot, for example, and the meadow pivot flushes, the bird won't chase after it. They'll just continue on quartering and dropping, quartering and dropping. They're a ground nesting species, and we find them largely in the uplands, and that's because that's where most of our suitable ground substrate remains. They would have happily nested in the lowlands had there been pockets left. And unfortunately, again, that's to the detriment of the bird, because these areas, large swathes of high vegetation that they require, they need vegetation over about 40 centimetres long to be nesting in. It's just disappeared from our countryside as things become more and more improved. The male hen harrier carries out these wonderful breeding displays, which I've got a video of here. These undulating loops, up and down loops, which would hopefully work for us. Give it a second. Go. You have to be patient with these things. Hope it works, because we do have a few videos in this. Let's see, there we go. There's a sandpiper in the background and a skylark. That's not the male calling. But anytime from mid-March, really, as soon as the air starts to warm up, this is the behavior we are looking for hen harriers. So this is meaning that birds have returned from their winter roost sites. They begin displaying over suitable habitat, trying to attract a mate. The females will do a bit of display as well, but it's really the males that go all out, and this will continue for weeks and weeks and weeks, long into the breeding season. If anyone wants to know some good sites to maybe go and see that, there are a couple of sites that are suitable for public, where you're not disturbing the birds, but you're a good bit away. You need your binoculars, but it's well worth a try to go and see it. Moving on then, another accipiter, the sparrowhawk. So amber listed across the UK, green listed still in Ireland. Hard to know true numbers of the sparrowhawks. The best guesstimate, 2,000 breeding pairs. It's a species that's very under-recorded in Northern Ireland. If anyone out there listening wants to be the new sparrowhawk person, please come forward, because, like I say, it's an untapped world of the sparrowhawk. They're medium to small in size. They've long, thin legs, and they are very adept at catching birds. Extremely sharp needle-like talons. You might see them the odd time at your bird feeder, which, you know, people often come up to us and say, oh, I don't like sparrowhawk, takes my birds, I'm trying to feed them. Well, if you have a sparrowhawk in your garden, that's fantastic, because it means that you have a really healthy population of birds, and you're doing something right to close that food chain by having a bird of prey at the top of it. Sparrowhawks can be found in all walks of life, basically. They build these really flimsy nest platforms because they're only about 150 grams to 300 grams, so the female's larger than the male. And you can see the size of the sticks there, really flimsy. So if you're out and about in the forest and you're looking for this kind of squirrel dray-ish looking, but a flat base of this flat platform for a nest, keep your eye out for sparrowhawks. Peregrine falcon.
Sorry, before we move on, just to go back in case I forget, the hen harrier, you said there were some places to go and see them. Can maybe just retouch on that at the end that is suitable for people to go to, or even not leaving? That would be great.
I'll remember to say that at the end. Yep.
Thanks.
So moving on to the first of our falcons then. So we've three falcons, the peregrine, the kestrel, and the merlin. And the thing that links the falcons, there's many things that link them together, but none of them build their own nests. So they always either use another species nest, like a raven, as I mentioned before, or for the merlin, they'll use a crow nest, or they scrape out substrate on like a rocky cliff. So peregrines, cliff nesting species. Green listed in the UK and Ireland. We've between 60 and 80 pairs in Northern Ireland. They're another small bird of prey, and the juveniles are this brownish, so the photo in the centre is a juvenile, and then the top right is an adult. So you can tell the difference because they're really lovely, puffy, pinkish colour in the juvenile. And as I say, they nest on crags and cliffs. We don't really with any regularity have peregrines nesting on buildings in Northern Ireland yet. So again, it'd be great for you to be one of the first people ever to see peregrines on buildings. There was one old church being used near Lough Neagh, and then I believe restoration works were carried out on the roof of it, and the birds didn't go back. So they do roost on several churches in cities. I know in Newry, they're in Dungannon, they're in Derry, Londonderry, but there's no evidence of them breeding on those churches. So again, keep your eyes peeled. Peregrine is one of our most heavily persecuted birds of prey, for two reasons really. So this picture in the top left is what's left of a pigeon leg at the end of a string. So what happens is, because peregrines eat pigeons, essentially, no one wants to lose their prize pigeons to a peregrine. So unscrupulous characters will tie an old pigeon, they'll cover it in poison and leave it at a peregrine nest site or roost site. In the bottom right there, I've circled in red, that's two fully grown chicks that were brought in, a poisoned pigeon by the adult, and both of them are dead now on the nest. And that was in County Antrim a couple of years ago. So the peregrine would be one species that we really carry out surveillance on, where at times there could be round the clock surveillance at particular sites where we believe something may happen. And we have the full support of the police in that as well. I'll touch on that again later. So another young, small falcon then is the merlin. That's our smallest bird of prey. Again, very understudied because they're very hard to survey. They are red listed across the UK and amber listed in Ireland, and we reckon there's around 40 breeding pairs. We are due a national merlin survey, so we'll know more when we carry that out. So it's hard to know exactly how many pairs, but 40 seems to be a good guesstimate. They traditionally nested on the ground, as they do in the whole rest of the UK. There's hardly a tree nester in mainland GB. But in Northern Ireland, because we are lacking this great deep heather areas, basically, and we don't have the grouse moors that they have across the water, they tend to nest in other species nests in the edge of conifer plantations. So in the top of that tree there, just ring, you'll see an old hooded crow's nest, and that's been used by a merlin for about the last 10 years. Kestrel. So it is amber listed in the UK and red listed in Ireland. That's a big change because it was amber. It's recently moved to red in Ireland. We, again, best guesstimate is 1,000 breeding pairs. Hard to know. They'll nest in cliffs, upland areas, lowland areas, etc. And they are loving life as cavity nesters. So similar to our barn owls, really. They'll use old buildings, they'll use old trees, but they'll also use old crow nests, raven nests, and other cliffs and quarries, etc., and sand dune cliffs. Just run through the next few very quickly because I want to get on a wee bit because the time's running out. Goshawk, between 0 and 10 breeding pairs in Northern Ireland, a very secretive species. They need forestry of 40 years and over, real mature forestry in quiet areas, and unfortunately we don't have a lot of that left, which again to the detriment of the bird. People might ask sometimes, have I seen a sparrowhawk or a goshawk? And the answer is, if you need to ask the question, it was definitely a sparrowhawk, because when you've seen a goshawk, you know it's goshawk. They are massive, big, chunky, heavy birds. You can imagine these birds eat buzzard chicks, so they are a big, hefty bird. Great hunter. Again, isolated at the uplands. There's a goshawk nest with a chick on it on the right hand side. Compare that back to your sparrowhawk nest I showed earlier, and you can kind of get a feeling from what I'm saying here that if you have to ask the question, was it a goshawk or sparrowhawk? It was a sparrowhawk. Golden eagle then, another bird that was reintroduced into Ireland. So reintroduced into Donegal in 2001. There were, I wrote it down, 63 chicks released in total. Again, like the kite, they haven't spread in the way that we thought they would. There have been attempts at nesting in Northern Ireland in recent years, but none successful. The last breeding in Northern Ireland was in the 1950s in County Antrim. This is a great photo here we put in with the chick standing on a young baby badger. Essentially, the eagles really want to be eating hares and grouse, and in the absence of them, they're having to eat other things that maybe aren't ideal. So a lot of foxes and badger brought into eagle nests and hooded crows, things like that. And there's been works carried out in Donegal and looking at their diet, and basically the habitat has changed so much since they were first reintroduced that these birds aren't able to rear young because they're starving, and that's the difficulties there. Slightly different story for the white-tailed eagle then. So reintroduced into Killarney National Park, and there've been 2 phases. So 100 birds released in the early 2000s, followed by a further 73 birds over the last 3 years. It's our largest bird of prey, the flying barn door, absolutely massive. Some of you might have been fortunate enough to see the birds come up through Antrim. So just like the 2 that were unfortunately killed, these birds use the Antrim Plateau as a way to travel up through Rathlin Island and over to the Mull of Kintyre. And they do that circuit fairly regularly. It must be to do with the way the air current goes, but satellite tag birds regularly take that route. There's a chick in the middle there with the wing tag on it. You can see the real mottled brown look, but then the adult on the left gets the real creamy white head and the pure white tail. They'll nest in marsh areas and on coasts, but really the thing that restricts them is trees. They need really big, strong trees to hold them, and we don't have a lot of mature trees left. They're, you know, each bird over 4.5 kilos. Do you imagine if they're going to rear 2 young and have 2 adults stand on that nest? It needs to be hefty. And we know avian influenza is having an impact as well. There were 4 dead chicks found on Mull in 22. The white-tailed eagle really likes to eat sick geese, unfortunately, and that's a way that the disease then is transmitted to them. Additional rare breeders that you may see in Northern Ireland then, the marsh harrier. In any given year, we could have 1 or 2 pairs nesting, but not with any regularity. Honey buzzard seen on migration, osprey migration. Short-eared owl, again, a nomadic species, may nest, may not, just depends on how much food's about. Snowy owl, you have the odd nesting bird, usually more on the west of the country. And the hobby, again, will come through in the summer. Last year, a bit different, when some Ulster wildlife staff confirmed the successful production of chicks by ospreys in County Fermanagh, which was fantastic news. We've been sort of keeping an eye on pairs since about 2018, but never had young, so brilliant news. And last year, just in the centre of that photo, if you can see it peeking up from the heather, that's a short-eared owl. So we had also short-eared owl nest in Antrim. But again, as I say, I'll not add these on to our number just yet. So especially with the short-eared owl, they're very nomadic. Just some years you get them, some years you don't. So if you're out surveying, then what are you looking for? So you can find these direct signs of nesting. So bird carrying prey. There's no reason a bird is gonna waste energy, whether that be a wee passerine carrying prey, a blackbird, sparrowhawk, unless it has a nest with chicks to feed. So that is the clinker. A bird carrying prey is your first tick box. Carrying sticks, copulating, alarm calling, molting, and territorial, fighting off of other birds of prey and other species. They're all great signs. And if that's what you see when you're out and about, that's what I want to hear about, because I can tick that off straight away as territorial occupation. Boom. Other signs you're looking for then when you're out and about, plucking posts. So a lot of our birds of prey, particularly the falcons, will pluck their food before bringing it over to the nest. Sparrowhawk will do that as well. So they'll find a lovely stump in a clearing in a wood or a fence post, etc. Pluck their food. And also molded feathers. So if you find a molded feathers around a forest, that's a great sign that there's going to be, whether it be a buzzard or a sparrowhawk there. And there's studies done on sparrowhawk feathers that show they're like a fingerprint, that you can tell if you pick up the same feathers every year. I mean the same feathers as in a primary or a tail feather. Each bird has its own unique set of markings, even though, you know, from a distance they all look similar, but they're all unique, and the same feather. So primary 1, for example, will look exactly like next year's primary 1, and then the year after that it's primary 1. And you can tell that it's the same bird that's breeding in your wood. Another thing to look out for is regurgitated pellets, which all birds of prey will bring up, and that's undigested bits of food. So that is our birds of prey and what to look out for. So let's just move on quickly to threats and pressures. So I mentioned earlier about these sorts of things that are affecting our birds of prey. Different birds being affected slightly differently by different versions of them. So we just look at habitat loss and degradation. So for example, agricultural intensification, afforestation, drainage, burning, and development. What can we do about that? Well, we can use your data to provide advice to statutory agencies about planning applications, for example. We can use your data to provide risk and sensitivity maps to be used by NIEA when they're looking at planning responses. We can use your data in real time to inform Forest Service. Say they're in harvesting an area and one of you contact me to say, oh, there's a pair of buzzards. We can do that in real time, get that stopped. We can use your long-term data to change agri-environment measures to get actual policy in place. We can all speak to landowners in real time at the time when we see birds are there. We can report nest disturbance and destruction to the PSNI. And we can comment on public consultations for plans. A big issue that we have across the country is disturbance of nesting birds. How does it affect them? Well, it can prevent them from settling in the first place. So that displaying hen harrier, he's not going to settle if there starts to be a few barbecues being held in the middle of that heather moorland. We can flush laying or incubating adults and prevent them from finishing laying all the eggs. We can cause the eggs or chicks to be dislodged if the bird flies off suddenly. It can cause egg chilling. So if the adult's not there to brood the chick or the young, they can get cold, wet. They can abandon the nest. And then it can also alert predators. So, for example, a bird of prey alarming at you under a nest is going to alert a squirrel or magpie or hoodie crow that there's a nest there. And it can prevent adults from actually defending the nest against predators. If an adult's calling at you because you're disturbing the nest, then they're not hunting and they're not delivering prey to chicks. And it can also cause chicks to fall from the nest cup and cause direct trampling. How can we recognize disturbance? Why is that turned around? You'll all have to turn your head to the side, apologies. So this was under license. This was a hen harrier nest visited under license. And you can hear already the bird. If you're being mobbed and a bird's calling at you, it's because you're disturbing its site. So birds will react in different ways. Some will alarm call, they'll mob, but others will be silenced. They'll fly off the nest without possibly even noticing, and they'll sit perched up close by. They might totally leave the nest site altogether. They might circle overhead, or they might fly repeatedly around an area, but go to land and then leave it at the last minute. So move away as quickly as possible to a distance at which that agitated behaviour ceases. Persecution is another issue then we want to touch on. So why would anybody kill birds of prey? Look how many people are here today to listen to this talk, and there's still people out there, it's hard to believe, that want to kill birds of prey. Perhaps it's a poor understanding of ecology. Maybe it's a misconception that buzzards or kites are a threat to livestock, or pets, or people. Headlines like this one below don't help. Birds of prey attack children. Mother speaks of concern after buzzards grab her daughter's head. Buzzard plural, two at one time. No, she was just walking under a nest site. After she did it the first time, she shouldn't have done it again. But anyway, we can't have birds of prey attacking people, but there are other ways around it. You shouldn't take the law into your own hands. Perhaps it's the deeply ingrained dislike of predators. Maybe people think they're doing good by trying to poison foxes and badgers, which is completely illegal. And then the birds of prey are falling foul to it. That's a red kite on the right-hand side, then a fox, then a buzzard, then the rabbit bait. Maybe it's to protect game birds. So 2 peregrines on the right-hand side were shot and thrown in a river in County Armagh. And we know from RSPB statistics that the total game-related convictions over the since 1990 have been 73.8% of all raptor persecution convictions. There's been 87 birds of prey confirmed killed or injured in illegal incidents in Northern Ireland since 2009. 87. They're only the ones we find. Other persecution types include nest destruction, the taking of wild birds or eggs. So, for example, the laundering of wild peregrines into the captive trade, and the misuse of pesticides. So people are using rodenticides outdoors when they shouldn't be, for example. Just to touch on that, the background level of rodenticides then. So background levels have been identified in 103 incidents where the raptors have been sent for toxicology testing since 2009. Well, almost all birds of prey now that go in for toxicology testing come back to some level of rodenticide in them. It's not surprising because they're eating rats, mice. We know even that sparrowhawks are getting rodenticide in them because the small birds that they're eating are also picking up bits of rodenticide grain around feed stores, etc. Rodenticides weren't deemed the cause of death in these incidents, but background levels might have non-lethal complications. So we don't know how it affects how the birds hunt. A lot of birds turn up and they died through starvation. Is it because of the rodenticides? Maybe birds have been knocked down on the road. Is it because their reaction time is affected by the rodenticide level? We just don't know. And a real emerging threat is this rodenticide called brodifacoum. It should never be used in open areas away from buildings. But we know from the graph in the bottom right, for example, that brodifacoum is shooting through the roof in the number of birds of prey it's being found in. And that's an eagle, a white-tailed eagle in Dorset being poisoned, was poisoned with brodifacoum. So we're starting to see this now as an emerging threat where people who are wanting to poison these birds of prey caught on that using the banned substances, they might get caught quicker if they've got the banned substances on them. But if they use something legal, like a rodenticide, like brodifacoum, which is fast acting, then how can they possibly be blamed? But some good news for wildlife off the back of that, there should be no second generation anticoagulant rodenticides permitted for use outside in open areas away from buildings from this July. What that means is that you can still use your rodenticide in and around your farm building, but you won't be able to use it, for example, in burrows out in the field or out along hedgerows. And up until July 2024, that was the case for some of the substances. We want everyone to try and raise awareness about, limiting the amount of rodenticide being used in the countryside, and also try and follow the campaign for responsible rodenticide use code, which we can pass on after the talk. Just to finish up, so Raptor Study Group are a member of the Partnership for Action Against Wildlife Crime, as are Ulster Wildlife and many, many, many others. We've all various subgroups, so we obviously are in the Raptor subgroup, and we do what we can with other partner agencies to try and raise awareness of what is a wildlife crime, how to report it, how to record it. Awareness such as producing leaflets, telling people to call 101. If you suspect a wildlife crime, call 101. It's a police matter. We also look at statistics. So we compile the Partnership for Action Against Wildlife Crime Raptor Persecution Report each year. And that allows us to do hotspot mapping and where these incidents are occurring. And then the police can actually put additional resources into particular areas. So the black areas, for example, in the map. We can look at which month things are happening in, and which species they're happening to, what methods of killing are being used, etc. As well as that, the Raptor Study Group have got a campaign on at the minute where we want to see the government ban the possession of dangerous pesticides. So believe it not, in the Wayne Act in 2011, they added something into the wildlife order which says you cannot be in possession of the following banned pesticides, which logically is fantastic. And then it's absolutely blank on the page below it. So at the minute, it's illegal for you to use a substance such as carbofuran, but technically, and it should be illegal to have it, but technically, because it's not on the list, you wouldn't be able to be done for the possession of carbofuran. Health and safety might get you for Health and Safety at Work Act for having a banned substance stored illegally or something like that. But until these substances get onto this list, there's very, very little the police can do. When they carry out a raid and they find these substances, they're not on the wildlife order currently because the page is blank. It's as simple as that. So confirmed poisoned in Northern Ireland since 2009, 32 buzzards, 13 peregrines, 13 kites, 3 white-tailed eagles and 1 golden eagle. And also 4 dogs and 11 cats have been banned with those banned substances, or poisoned with those banned substances in that period. So we are, through this campaign, trying to build up a list of names for our petition that we can then present the legislation to the Minister to get this list added. As well as that, we carry out various ways of tackling persecution, whether that be raising awareness, wildlife cameras, working with the police where they're using drones to carry out surveillance at peregrine nest sites, colour marking individuals. We're working on putting satellite tags on red kites. So these are 4 of the kites. You can just, no, it's 3, sorry. 3 kites. You can see how they cover the length and breadth of Ireland. And again, what I said earlier, they hate crossing water. So as soon as they get to the coast at all, they turn around and move on to another area. Fantastic word. So finally, what can you do? Well, you can help us with raising awareness and educating people. You can help us with nest and roost monitoring. And most importantly, probably to take away is you can report suspicious activity to the PSNI on 101. or totally anonymously, report it through Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111. So become a member and help monitor sites. Send in your records to give us a better picture so we can help. Help us to raise awareness and educate people and report suspected crime. And the last one I've kept in yellow, think, be wildlife aware, think how your actions might be impacting the birds when you're out and about, and help others to do the same. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Eimear. That was really fascinating. Also quite disturbing as well that so many birds of prey are still persecuted. And we will share some of the petition that is current. I think you've over 40,000 signatures now for the petition to ban some of those pesticides. I still can't believe there was a blank page in the wildlife order for that. Surely that was a mass error, but anyhow, we can share that with everybody that's here and with our membership too, so that people can sign that if they'd like to do that. So yeah, thank you so much for that. That was really fascinating. And I'm going to just go and have a wee look in the chat first before I open up the questions.
Yeah.
And we'll just have a wee look through here and see if anyone, a few people just mentioning that they've seen, obviously to go back to the first question, in case I forget that I had about where would you go to see, you'd mentioned.
Yeah, I was just thinking on that one. So I think the best thing to do, because this has been recorded and sent it out to so many people, and obviously we want to not disturb the person. I think if people who really want to see it want to email me.
Okay, that was
and I'll
for
let them know.
Harrier, wasn't it? Yeah.
That was for hen harrier, yep, for displaying. So that's sort of that middle of April, early April time key.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect, thank you. So yeah, other people just said, Peter just said buzzards not quite common in the Belfast Hills. What else? Used to see somebody else, Jill had said she used to see peregrine falcons in Nottingham on high level buildings, and I know you can see them in Belfast as well. They're quite common, aren't they too? Peter just saying
just no nesting. You get them hunting off the city hospital, and they're in and around the city hall, but it's just getting that parrot actually lay eggs. Be interesting.
Peter has just said catches used to be a common sight in the Belfast Hills, less so now.
John, rodenticides are having a massive impact on kestrels.
John just said he'd seen actually really interesting with the tag colours that you talked about for the red kites. Again, didn't realise ours were all brown, but he'd seen a red kite last week and counted down with an orange wing tag.
Yeah, so I should have clarified that.
So the sea then, or what happened then if they don't like water?
No. So I should have clarified that with the wing tags. So the colour code on the left denotes where the bird is from. So all our birds are brown on the left. Colour code on the right, which is where the orange tag will have been, denotes the year that it was born. Okay. So the orange will also have had a brown stripe to tell you if you only see one side, the other side's brown, and the brown will have had an orange stripe to say the other side's orange.
Okay.
So orange born kites were from last year. That was a 2023 bird.
Brilliant. Sparrowhawks, just again, we've had a lot of reports of sparrowhawks, just somebody else, and there's just common sight near Belfast Castle and people's garden. Yeah, we get a lot of people asking white sparrowhawks. Again, good point you made about them, being a sign of a healthy population of birds. I think people get quite worried about that when they see them in their garden and pouncing on birds.
I'd love people to send in their records of sparrowhawks, because people see them so often, kind of like buzzards. But if we don't have this baseline of presence absence, how can we ever know when things change? So even though it might be a common species, we still want to know about it, and it only takes a few minutes to fill in, whether it be nirsg.com/sightings, just say seen a sparrowhawk, put in the grid reference and the date, done. Yeah, and then I'll do the rest.
We'll get that added to the website as well too, Eimear, just because that would be a good one to have on for all the other sightings that we have too. Do you think, this is a good question from Ashley, do you think if we had more mature trees, we'd have more raptors?
Good, that is a good question. Depends, the right trees in the right place. So if you're talking about conifer forestry, no would be my answer. The birds only would ever use the edges of it. If you're talking about big sycamores, oaks, beech, pine, even Scots pine, then quite possibly yes. But our apart from the eagles, our tree nesting raptors aren't really restricted because there's less trees. Buzzards are doing well in terms of where they're nesting. Kites, plenty of nests. It's those real old mature stuff that we're lacking for the likes of the white-tailed eagles. You know, when they breed here, which will be very, very soon, they're likely to be in the Fermanagh end of, you know, where more ancient woodland is, more so in the east of the province.
Okay. Thanks for that. Another one, just about the sentences again. They always are, aren't they? Peter's just in the sentences handed down to offenders are obviously far too light a deterrent. Even the £5,000 is not enough, really. Sure, it's not for it to take it seriously.
Yeah, and there's never been a prosecution in Northern Ireland
What?
for a raptor prosecution. No, it's very, very difficult. So if we find the bird dead, how do you link it to who did it? So you really need the information from people coming forward. So any small piece of information at all, and then the police can do an investigation or try and catch someone in the act. So the police are doing a lot of work at the minute, surveillance wise, with their drones, you know, trying to catch people, because you can find baits in someone's land. They'll say, well, someone planted it there. You could find the poisonous substance in their shed, and they say, well, the shed's not locked, someone could put it there. You know, you still have got to get through the public prosecution service to even hear the case. And it is very, very difficult. But the more information the police have, the more likely we are of getting a successful prosecution.
Yeah, I guess it is a difficult one, definitely, isn't it? And that's why the wildlife crime number, that 101, is the one to phone and ask for the case number, isn't it? Whenever you're doing that,
That's right.
You follow up.
That's right. Yeah.
Someone else, Williams. How far do buzzards nest from their hunting ground? Do they nest close by their hunting ground?
Yeah. Okay. So it's density dependent. It totally depends on how much food there is. So I have had nests. Generally, what we say is about a kilometre radius. So if you put the nest in the centre and draw out a kilometre, but it depends. It could be up to 3 kilometres because if there's less food around. But I've also had nests that are about 800 metres apart from each other. But there was a hill in the middle, and one set of birds hunted to the left, and the other set of birds hunted to the right, for example. So it's not a definite, what's the word, finite number. It changes, and it is totally dependent on how much food there is.
Okay. Thanks for that, honestly. Yeah, someone just saying they've spotted Eimear to red kites today near Downpatrick. Yeah, I see them quite a lot around here to Eimear. So yes, remember to record. You said, yeah, record your sightings again on the website, and again, I'll send a link round to the sightings too. After with the recording of this. Patricia has asked, do any of the raptors that you talked about mate for life?
Yes, they all do. They all do, unless there's something happens to one of the mates. So the birds that are marked, for example, we know well, we've done the marking of the buzzards and the marking of kites, and they will stay together for as long as they stay alive. A lot of them, and it's the same with the peregrines. But the problem is that we have this high turnover rate of adults. So you'll find, for example, where the kites are marked and they're maybe together for 5 years, and next thing there's a new female, and you never know what happened to the old female. But you know something has happened there because there's no divorce, if you know what I mean, once they're happily, successfully breeding together.
They'll repair every year then.
Yeah. I should just say about that one in Downpatrick as well, an interesting thing to note with the kites is just a week ago or about 10 days ago, someone found a kite that had been hit by a wind turbine just outside Downpatrick. So kite in 2 pieces. That's our 3rd kite that we know of that's been shot by a turbine.
Apologies, my power just cut there. Sorry about that. Eimear was probably panicking, going, oh no. Sorry, everyone. I think I just see if there's any more in the chat here, Eimear, and then we'll open it up here. Just seeing what time we've got. We're at 8 o'clock, but we can do a few other questions. Other question, one was, could peregrines not be encouraged to nest in buildings with some type of nest box platform? That was from Kevin.
It's a good question, Kevin, and it's a funny one because yes, of course they can, if you really wanted them to, but there are enough sites, natural sites, quarry sites in Northern Ireland that we really don't need to encourage them onto buildings. And the thing is that long before I was around, and there was an agreement, a gentleman's agreement between some of the original Raptor Study Group founders and a couple of the pigeon clubs, where they agreed that they wouldn't encourage as they saw it, the artificial increase of the peregrine population by putting up nest boxes as in such times as they weren't needed. So basically what I'm trying to say is there's loads of sites out there that if the birds weren't being killed, those sites would be occupied ahead of the building. So it's not something that we're thinking about anytime in the near future, but should the population start to decline or something serious go wrong, we may start to think about it.
Thanks, Eimear. And one from Jill here. I'm pretty sure she said, I saw an eagle of some sort in the hills between Desert Martin and Moneymore. Could that, could that be, what sort of eagle? Do you think that, could it be an eagle? Could be the ones that breed in Donegal, or?
She could well have seen an eagle in that area, yes. Could have been a golden eagle, indeed. Yep, right. Report it in.
There you go, Jill, get that one recorded. What, if anything, can be done, this is from Reese, to encourage the increase of Merlin?
Good question, Reese. So Merlin traditionally ground nesting, apart from 2023, we haven't had a ground nester here in about 15 years. So we're concentrating on tree nesting birds, so that's in old crow nests. To try and encourage them, you could put up nest baskets. So there's such a thing as, I think it's described as a long-eared owl nest basket. And it's just a woven nest, and you fill it with moss, grasses and things, and put them up, and that will help encourage them into an area. But they really need a nice isolated patch where it's quiet on the edge of open Merlin. So you think of Merlin are hunting moorland species, so your meadow pivot skylarks, the large moths, etc. And you want to be thinking about putting up nest baskets on the edges of conifer plantation there. But unfortunately, we know that from the forestry plans, there's all that old mature, something like 60% of old mature stuff in Antrim is coming down in the next 2 or 3 years. And we've no idea how that's going to impact our Merlin population. So yeah, nest baskets. We don't have a gentleman's agreement with any.
I've never heard of those before. Probably our conservation team has, but yeah. And powder. Is that being used, Joe has asked, to kill birds of prey? Is that being used?
Bendiocarb, that's what killed the 2 eagles.
Oh, yep. Okay. Is that one of the pesticides then? Is that in one? No, it's not.
So technically last year, bendiocarb would have still been legal for use indoors in a cavity to kill ants. And it was used very much outdoors, not anywhere near any building. So that's an abuse of the product. But as of this July, that product is no longer going to be sold. So professional users can still use it for 180 days after July. So we're going to include it on our list, because by the time that legislation and everything goes around, it'll be not even professional use for using it. But that's an interesting question, because yes, that is exactly what killed the eagles.
Okay, just a different name. Obviously, that's the chemical name.
Yeah.
Mo is asking. I'm sure you do get these from Cedar. Obviously, Cedar has its own recording system, but it's probably better to record them directly, I would have thought, with you guys rather than through the Cedar website. We've had in our case, we prefer the records to come to us directly for like red squirrels and owls and that thing. Just because we can ask people questions directly if there's things missing on the recording form. But what's
exactly? Yeah, much prefer that it comes directly to us, only because I can go back and check with the person and check species ID and things like that with them as well. CDAR is a great source, but sometimes the grid references aren't as exact as we'd like and things like that. So at least if it comes directly to me, I can always come back to the person and check things. So